Welcome to the American Public Works Association's Talking Top Tech webinar series. Today's panel discussion will be 1 hour in duration and is titled Talking Top Tech, Asset Management. My name is Rita, Cassida, and I will be your facilitator today. I am an education manager at APWA. I have a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering and a Master's of Science in Engineering Management. I'm a licensed professional engineer in Kansas, and before joining APWA, I served as the Public Works Director for the City of Lewisburg, Kansas. Due to the free-form format of this program, it is not eligible for CEUs. A recording of today's program will be available in the APWA Members Library and on YouTube within 1 week. APWA members can log into the library to access content free of charge. Today's session is interactive, so if any of the participants have questions for our speakers, please type them into the chat pod. You may do this at any time throughout the program. After the program, please join us on LinkedIn to continue the conversation. A link was included in your program instructions and is on the screen now. Now it's time to introduce today's panelists. Chris Champion is the Director International for APWA, the Institute of Public Works Engineering, Australasia. Jeff Claus is the Principal Asset Management Consultant for CDM Smith. Darwin Durnie is the Senior Principal for Stantec Consulting Limited. Hesha Gamble is the County Engineer for the County of Greenville, South Carolina. And Toby Rickman is the Deputy Director for Pierce County Public Works. APWA is delighted to bring you such knowledge and experience. We are going to start the program with each of the panelists introducing themselves and giving a brief overview of how they are involved with asset management. Chris, would you like to start with your introduction?
Thank you, Rita. Good morning, everyone. Well, good morning for me. It's Friday morning here, and good afternoon to you. I was the CEO for the Institute of Public Works Engineering Australasia for 15 years. Australasia being Australia and New Zealand. New Zealand merged, the New Zealand Association merged with us about 4 or 5 years ago. And then since then I've been, the last 3 years, Director International, taking our asset management tools and resources internationally. And before that, I had 30 years in local government as a Director Engineering. APWA publishes the International Infrastructure Management Manual, the Black Book, the IIMM, which we first published in 2000, and we're now up to the 5th edition. And we've published about 15 practice notes on various aspects of asset management. So that's largely where I've come from in asset management, really working in it for the last 18 or 20 years, and looking forward to this discussion today. Thanks, Rita.
Thank you, Chris. Jeff, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, I'm Jeff Claus, and I'm with CDM Smith. I'm one of the asset management leads for our water and wastewater and stormwater practices. And we've got a similar organization for transportation asset management. And so for almost the last 20 years or so, I've been doing consulting work across the country to implement asset management programs. And asset management means a lot of different things to different people. Some people think it's, a piece of software, or there's an easy button somewhere. And so really, in the reality, or at least my view of asset management, is that it's really kind of the combination of, it's really kind of doing actually what you're doing already in terms of managing your infrastructure, only using technologies and tools and business processes in your workforce to ultimately collect data and to make smarter decisions about what you want to maintain and how you ought to be investing your capital dollars. So, my involvement in asset management for the last 20 or so years has been, working with small and large water and wastewater and stormwater utilities across the country. As an example, for the last 6 or 7 years, I've been helping the Navy Public Works organization implement an asset management program to cover all of their utilities around the world. The Navy essentially owns and operates 65 little cities. And so we developed an asset management program to help them understand what they own, what condition it's in, what's critical to meeting their service levels, and to help them prioritize maintenance and capital projects. And so it's a huge project in that it spans many different locations, but it's really effective, I think, in the end at producing a way in which across all utilities they can identify where their dollars are going to give them the biggest bang for the buck. So happy to be here today. Thanks, Rita.
Thank you, Jeff. Darwin, would you like to go next?
Sure. Thanks, Rita. Good afternoon, everyone. Darwin Durnie. I'm with Stantec Consulting. I'm a senior principal and currently the director of client development. After having started up a few business centers, decided to get into that stream. Spent about 20 years in the public sector. I'm about 37 years in the game so far, and ended up a life member of APWA here not too long ago. So I get to hang around and be part of what's going on. I'm the past president of the Canadian Public Works Association from 2010 through 2014, but spent a long time on that board and, in fact, on a few of the task forces and APWA boards. I'm presently on the Certification Council with APWA, and it's great at the start to see some of the certification things scrolling on through. With regard to asset management, I've been able to view it through many lenses in my career and from a few different avenues. And not only on master plans for water, wastewater transportation or development plans, but also through emergency management. And that emergency management's been in two lenses. I've been the head of infrastructure and sites for 2 G7 summits and one of the G20s that Canada has hosted. And I've also been a senior advisor to government on the ground in 3 of Canada's largest disasters in the last 8 years. So in all those circumstances, I've been able to beg and borrow, adopt and adapt asset management principles of level of service and risks, inventory and condition, and been able to apply that across the board in the Canadian scene. And we were able to use that adopt and adapt approach to be able to get some significant funding from the Government of Canada to roll out and mature asset management training across the land. One of the things that we've been able to do, and he's on the call, is Chris Champion and IPWA. Their NAMS product, the National Asset Management System, the IIMM, the Infrastructure International Management Manual, have helped enormously and establish the benchmark and the path forward with asset management training, entry level, and even to some degree more sophisticated systems in Canada to be able to hit the ground running. So we'll probably talk about that a little later on. With Stantec, we're in 6 continents, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, throughout the United States and in Canada. So we get to look at things in a lot of different aspects of asset management. And what my job is the fun is going at Stantec. I get to be able to pull some of that together and have a look at it and see how we can cross-reference, cross-sell, and bring that to our clients, near and far, large and small. So thanks, Rita. Back to you.
All right, thank you, Darwin. Hesha, would you like to go next with your introduction?
Sure, thanks, Rita. I'm Hesha Gamble. I'm the county engineer for Greenville County in South Carolina. We're one of the largest counties here. We're managing over 1,700 miles of roads here in Greenville County. So asset management is important for us to be able to keep up with everything and figure out what needs to happen next. We will get into a little bit more discussion about how we're using it here, but as the chair of the Engineering and Technology Committee, asset management is one of the #1 topics that we'll be tackling this year. Thanks again, Rita.
Thank you, Hesha. And Toby, finally, would you like to finish with your introduction?
Sure, thank you, Rita. My name is Toby Rickman. I'm the Deputy Director for Pierce County Public Works, and that's in Tacoma, Washington, that area up in the northwest portion of the United States. And I have been involved in the public works industry for 35 years and started with optimization of freeway management systems. And so that's kind of what got me started into the notion of asset management, and optimization was in more the operational arena. Since then, I've spent 21 years with the Washington State Department of Transportation, and where we were working on statewide asset management systems for traffic signals, electrical systems, intelligent transportation systems, as well as pavements and bridges. And so we had quite a background there, but then I took a lot of that to the local government of Pierce County to optimize. We have 1,500 miles of road. We have a regional sewer system. We have a regional stormwater system, a regional solid waste system, 2 ferries, and 2 airports. So we've been doing it now for about 13 years and have been pioneering some of the approaches that will work here in the United States. And I've also had the honor of chairing the APWA's National Task Force on Asset Management for the past 3 years, and was honored recently to be named as the chair of the new Asset Management Committee for APWA, where we'll be charged with helping our 30,000 members to, most of them, 75% of them, who are small jurisdictions with a population under 50,000, to figure out how they can develop asset management systems that'll work for them. So looking forward to it and this conversation. Thank you, Rita.
All right. If you have questions at any time, please add them to the chat pod. I have some questions that were submitted in advance, so we're going to start with those. I'm going to combine 2 questions for the panelists, number 1 and number 15. A good question to start with was to either describe or define what you see as asset management, and then bonus points if you can do it without using the words asset or management. So if we want to, I guess we can just start from the top. Chris, do you want to tackle that one, or does somebody else wants to? Just let me know, and we can go around to define asset management without using asset or management for bonus points.
Okay, I'll see if I can do it without mentioning those 2 words. I'll take a strategic view, and it's about knowing your asset inventory and then estimating the required expenditure going forward to maintain, operate, and renew your infrastructure to deliver the level of service agreed with your community. And when you do that, it then needs trade-offs between level of service, risk, and the funding available to get that balance and that information, that forward projection is to integrate it into the long-term financial plan of the municipality or utility or other organization. So it's we take a strategic view about planning for how you will fund and manage, operate your infrastructure into the future, rather than, say, having your head in the sand or just doing it on a yearly basis. So I'm not sure if I use those 2 key words or not, but that's my take on it.
All right. Jeff, do you want to answer that question?
I mean, first of all, I guess I'd agree with everything that Chris said. Ultimately, I guess, and if I didn't say this already, you know, everybody's already doing asset management. Probably everybody on this call today, on some level, you know, knows what they own, what condition it's in, what's critical to their operations. And so really asset management for me and for a lot of the folks that I work with is really just, improving their understanding of those things, collecting data, implementing systems and business processes to help, collect information, sustain information, and then make smarter decisions based on how they ought to be managing their infrastructure.
All right, Darwin, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, excellent points being made by Jeff and Chris. I'm going to try and get in the bonus round, though, and not say those two ineffable words that you had. I think one of the things that you've got to keep in perspective, and Jeff just hit on it, is by and large the development plans, the master plans, the annual budgets that you create in your agencies, or in some cases we work with private utilities or private folks as well. Those are a long way down the trail of developing long-term financial strategies for the mobile and the fixed built infrastructure that we're all managing. But what the overall systematic approach that's in the IIMM or in many other methods that are established, it's a conflict resolution system in that you don't have to perfectly balance the equations. What you need to do is you need to be able to look at the level of service, the risks, the condition of your inventory, and make decisions from there that are balanced rather than binary decisions and be in a conflict with whether it's the political masters, whether it's your colleagues in other departments, whether it's the finance group or wherever. So it's a bit of a balancing act. There's no AM unicorns out there, but on the same note, for many, many years, the built infrastructure has been in pretty good shape, and somehow we're making it happen. This just gives a little more strategic or systematic approach to it. So look forward to hearing more.
All right, Toby, did you have something you wanted to add on this question?
Sure, thank you, Rita. I think to me, I've always kind of looked at asset management as really just simply the optimization of resources in providing a service. And to me, that's a long-term service. Maybe that's the point of view that's different from what we consider in the infrastructure world. But what really I found that in America that we have to really think about and look at is we're trying to optimize resources, and the resources are limited. I think we all recognize that the investment in infrastructure has not been what we need. And so one of the things I always challenge people to think of when they think of asset management is to look at where the money is. You've heard the joke about asking the guy who robbed the bank, why'd you rob the bank? And he said, that's where the money is. And I would argue the same thing from an asset management point of view. We actually spend, and I would challenge each person who's listening to think about your annual budget. You spend probably 4 to 5 times every year on your maintenance and operational costs than you do on your preservation costs. So you can't not optimize your maintenance and operations through the modern technology that Jeff talked about. You need to optimize all of that as well as your preservation methods because that's where the money is. The money is in M&O, and we need to, and that's where the biggest opportunity is if that's where all the money is. So if we can create a more streamlined, optimized operational systems as well as our preservation systems, then we'll be able to better afford to provide our infrastructure services that every community needs. So we have a very simple budget philosophy here in Pierce County, which is just meet community needs at the lowest long-term cost. And I think you could sum up what we're trying to do in that simple phrase.
Very good. Thank you, Toby. We have a live question from one of our participants. Wendy would like to know, in selling your story to your governing body, which is better, local peer comparisons or national standards? And I believe Hesha wanted to start by answering that question.
Thanks, Rita. In my particular area, I always find it easier to sell the politicians on local and peer comparisons. Anything where you can show that other agencies of a similar size that are in your region and in your area are doing this, or how is it making them better, that usually goes farther than a national standard, because obviously things are different in the Southeast than they are, say, on the West Coast or in another country. So I found that the local and peer comparisons usually work best.
Thank you, Hesha. I believe, Toby, did you have something you wanted to answer on this question?
I want to completely agree with Hesha. At least I've found in America that, and I've seen the good work that Darwin's talked about in the National Report Card in Canada, and others have done a similar thing. While we've had a national conversation about the quality of our infrastructure for quite some time, and produce a report card every 4 years, it isn't having the impact on our local government decision makers that it needs to. And so we believe, and I think Hesha points out, that a better comparison is how you're doing individually as a jurisdiction and your neighbors that people feel. And because it is the local, at least our experience is, it's the local elected officials who will pay attention to those comparisons or that information, and they don't want to be compared to somebody else somewhere that they don't know and experience. So local comparisons are the best.
Okay, thank you, Toby. Jeff, I believe you had something you wanted to add?
Sure. I mean, first of all, I'd just like to agree with both Hesha and Toby. I mean, more often than not, it's those kind of local references, you know, hey, what are my neighbors doing, that kind of drive their ability to sell asset management programs to their kind of stakeholders. The only instance where I've really kind of come across an interest in national standards, or, you know, needing to adhere to national standards, is in a lot of the federal work we do. The Coast Guard, the Navy, the Marine Corps, those organizations and their public works organizations are very much driven by kind of national standards, or interested in adhering to national standards. But for the most part, it's those local relationships or local examples that are kind of selling people on implementing asset management.
All right, thank you, Jeff. And to check with our friend in Australia, could you give your insight into that question?
Yes, I think it actually, you need the local input, but also national, international input or examples. Convincing elected members of asset management takes a lot of goes at it, and it's a long conversation. So I think you need to have quite a few channels of information coming through. There's definitely the local stories, but in many cases it could be that your neighbours aren't doing asset management as well, so it's hard to get things going. Sometimes it needs national approaches, such as a report card, but where we took that further was we had state-by-state and national sustainability of infrastructure, or sustainability of local government, financial sustainability of local government inquiries, and that really showed up that the main issue was infrastructure, because infrastructure, particularly for local government, is such a big part of the budget, or the capital budget. There's also nationally or internationally, you can get access to videos and video clips, so that can help tell the story, and there's some good ones around of that. And sometimes, in the end, it might even be disasters that happen. So in the United States, we often hear of bridges, major failures, and that can be a facilitator of doing more work on asset management or getting more funding. So I think it's a bit of everything. You need quite a few different channels of information, And with elected members, it's more of a discussion. You can't train elected members. They don't like getting trained, but they like discussing issues with you. So I think discussing in a workshop sense is a good way to try and get understanding at the governance level.
Thank you, Chris. Our next question is from Al. Rights of way are important assets, not mentioned so far. What are you doing to optimize the use of these assets? And I believe Darwin was going to start by answering that question.
Sure. Al, I sit on the Canadian Common Ground Alliance as the Canadian Public Works Association rep to that group. And the first committee that I got involved in the early 80s was the UCC, the Utility Coordination Committees for out in Alberta. And we have a tremendous amount of oil and gas activity in Alberta. So there's a lot of competing interests for the rights of way, for setbacks, for development zones, etc. And we've got a few different standards that have been established. But you're spot on that those right-of-way management, that right-of-way, is an asset that need to be managed. And that management goes beyond just line assignments. It goes right on through, in some cases, to the tax levies or assessments that are put against those, or, in fact, licensure or just line assignments that are given. Often other areas that can be overlooked that are similar in nature are rivers, streams, wildland areas that sometimes are a huge part of that infrastructure fabric in municipalities, both good and bad. We have natural disasters that can overwhelm streams. We can have those natural disasters overwhelm the pipelines that go underneath those streams, or, as Chris pointed out earlier, collapses take place, and sometimes those bridges include other assets on them, be it telecoms, gas, power that are hanging on them, or water. So right-of-way management is absolutely a necessary part of the asset management fabric, and underpins all of it, and can be dealt with as a class by itself or integrated into each of the areas of water, sewer, buildings, transportation.
Thank you, Darwin. I think Toby wanted to answer that question as well.
Sure, just maybe an interesting perspective on this. Because we spend a lot of time in local government working with a lot of people who want to use the right-of-way. And what's so interesting, I think, and maybe it's, I don't know if it's different in different states, we'd have to look into that. But generally, our public rights-of-way can't be, we often don't get any resources, or it's not a resource that local governments can make money off of. Often, so maybe but what you can do is try to control it, as Darwin's suggesting, because there's a lot of people who do use it. But given the kind of public access, meaning any company has a right to access the public rights of way in terms of road rights of way primarily, that it's again, it's an important asset to manage for sure. It's just that normally when we think about trying to optimize the resource, if you will, rights of way don't often return, they don't have a rate of return for us. I bring up an example of, we have water rights associated with a large piece of land for our sewer utility. And that we can actually sell and make money off of the water that would help defray the costs for our sewer ratepayers, and utilities can sometimes do that. Rights of way, it seems like you're more trying to manage it more from almost a defensive point of view, rather than trying to optimize a way to make money off of it for your ratepayers. But that's just a perspective I thought I'd throw out there.
All right, thank you, Toby. Does anybody else have anything they want to add to that question? If not, we'll move on to another one. All right, the next question is, if I don't have enough money to maintain my infrastructure, why should I do asset management? One of the panelists want to tackle that question. Looks like, okay, everybody does. So let's start with Hesha.
Well, I think that asset management will help you justify why you need more money to maintain your infrastructure. You're able to show what you have, what the condition is, how you can use the money you're requesting to improve whatever infrastructure it is that you're managing. So I think that it gives you the data that you can use in order to request the funding that you need to maintain your infrastructure properly.
All right, thank you, Hesha. And I think Chris wanted to add to that question.
Yes, I think if you start asset management, it can help, like Hesha just said, it can help you build the case for more dollars, more funding. It can help explain to your community that, and to your elected people, that if you don't continue, or if you don't change the circumstances that where your level of service may end in the 10, 15, 20 years, so where you're heading, it's a lot better if you've got information to be able to make informed decisions. And elected members, if they haven't got good information, they'll make it off the seat of their pants. But if you give them good information, they might start to prioritise their funding differently. It might help you put a case to state or federal governments in our case. But also, it's not just about funding. So we should be careful that it's not the only solution is funding. You actually have quite a palette of solutions available to you to get that balance between the needs, the risk, and the funding available. So some of the things could be that you need to dispose of some assets, that you will have to make the decision that you won't maintain or renew certain assets. You might need to accept a lower level of service than you've done your calculations on. You might look at alternative service delivery. So perhaps instead of day labour, you might have to contract some parts out or join with your regional councils and get more of a bigger procurement approach. Or it's just having the full story and being a lot more informed. It may be a changing priorities of existing funding. So there's actually quite a palette of choices that's available to help you manage your infrastructure. So we should, if we just say as public works engineers that the solution is more money, you're not going to get there. You've really got to take also some responsibility as well on how you manage those assets.
Thank you, Chris. I think Toby had something to add on this one.
Yeah, I think there's some good points there, and I think that to me, you know, so many people have done asset management without, you know, maybe the full understanding. They just started knowing they got to do better, and so to me, asset management, modern asset management, gives you the tools to do better with the assets you have. And I think just professionally, we have a responsibility to do that. I think it's kind of almost unspoken in at least what I hear and what I see politically, nationally in America, which is that kind of this narrative. The narrative I hear from people is we pay our taxes, therefore we assume you are taking care of our assets in an optimal way. And so I think based on that simple assumption that most Americans have, that you need to pick that up and say, we are doing as good as we can with the resources that you give us. And I think the wonderful thing about asset management, modern asset management, is I think using technology and using the methods that are available in modern asset management, you can use your resources, your existing resources, more effectively. And hopefully that will lead to them trusting you with additional resources. But I think that even optimizing your existing resources is our responsibility as public works professionals. And I think if we do that, then we can perhaps be confident they'll give us the resources we need, or we'll have to make all of the service choices that Chris mentioned. So I think that we need to do it because it's the right thing to do.
Thank you, Toby. We have another question from one of our participants. If you had to pick one area within your organization to start an asset management review or plan, what area would give you the biggest bang for your buck to best illustrate the need to do it agency-wide? Looks like Jeff might want to start on that, followed by Chris. Do you want to go ahead, Jeff?
Sure. Generally speaking, I think anything you feel, whether it's true or not, might be in the worst condition or might be most consequential if it fails. It's pretty easy. We do pilot projects all the time, or people are interested in pilot projects where we just kind of select something that's suspected to be in very poor condition, whether it's pipe in the ground or it's a pump, and do an assessment of it to really map out its failure modes, its consequences of failure, what the preventive maintenance program might be, what an appropriate preventive maintenance program might be for it, and what sort of capital projects you might do. As an example, the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District, which owns and operates 3 large treatment plants and the sewer interceptors for the greater Cleveland area, we helped them implement an asset management program, and it all started really by a condition and criticality assessment that we did for some large blowers that they had that were like 80 years old. And so by kind of digging into those critical pieces of equipment and doing kind of a full assessment, kind of showing what could be done, the district ended up employing an asset management. They developed an asset management organization and an asset management program over the course of several years for all of their infrastructure. So, yeah, condition and criticality. I think if you can kind of pinpoint those things, you might identify some low-hanging fruit and illustrate the benefit.
All right, great. Thank you, Jeff. Chris, would you like to add to that answer?
So for municipalities, the greatest value of your infrastructure you own is actually usually in your roads. Maybe 80% of your asset value is in your roads. You usually have better information for your roads, and that might be a place where you start, where you could get the biggest bang for the buck. It could be if you've got a large area, you might break it into a ward, so just try a smaller area. I think it's important to initially try and get a better understanding of the concepts of strategic asset management looking forward. So it could even be footpaths. It's best to start with linear assets. I think they're easier than, say, buildings, which are made of many more components. So, yeah, I'd probably start with roads or footpaths, and it could be a whole network or a smaller part of your network, depending on just how much infrastructure you have. And criticality comes into it, and the urgency of it. If you can try and learn the concepts and principles on something that's not quite so critical, depends on how critical it is, that might be good too. So I think the important thing is just to make a start.
All right, and I think I have another question that's kind of along those same lines that Darwin was going to answer, and it was to start the process of data collection. Is it preferable to start small and work up to eventually having all the assets in the inventory, or what would you recommend?
Hey, I really like this question in that, got a lot of bright young minds that work in our various offices. And one of the things they want to do when they get an assignment to help a community develop an asset management plan is break out the measuring tapes and the survey equipment and start compiling how many meters, miles, or acres we have of a particular thing. And my challenge to them always is this: in an asset management system, what are the risks, level of service, and dollars that are available before you even go to the field? That is an integral part of the inventory that you must do in your asset management journey. And that is to define not what is in capital and what's in operations, but discern between what are just pure operating and what is renewal. And some of that renewal is part and parcel of your operating budget, and part of that renewal is in capital as well. So it's really important that we have good knowledge of the level of service that you're trying to achieve, the risks that are keeping you awake at night, and finally, what dollars do you have to be able to move forward. With that in mind, it then can target and identify the depth that you have to go to, or the length or the strength of the data collection versus where to start. And I think I'll leave it at that, and I'm sure others will comment.
All right, I think, Chris, you had something to add to Darwin's answer?
Yeah, I'd kind of confirm what Darwin was saying. I don't start off with thinking you've got to go and get lots and lots of data to start with. We usually say stop collecting data, because more often than not, mostly you'll have sufficient data to start doing something. And if you start to write an asset management plan, then you'll better understand the exact data you need or where you need to improve your data. We probably, if you start the data end, you'll find that you'll collect too much information, too much detail, so it's better to actually start with what you've got, write an asset management plan. It'll be rough first up, but it'll actually help you understand where your deficiencies are, where you need to do a bit more work. So that's, we'd say stop collecting data. Along the lines of Darwin was start looking at the bigger picture.
All right, Toby, did you have anything to add to that question?
Yeah, I think there's some good thoughts there. I think the other thing that I always encourage people to do is think of the 80-20 rule, and that is, you know, you probably already have a lot of information on the most valuable parts of an asset. So, for example, roads, you probably already know about your bridges and your pavements and some of the more critical pieces of that infrastructure. And so, you know, before you start spending a lot of energy to collect the data on all the 20% of the value, you know, really focus on what is 80% of the value. So I encourage somebody when they first start an asset management system is, tell me what are the components of that asset, and then what is the value of those components. And at about 80%, I say, you know, if you can get good at that 80% of the value of that element of the asset, you're doing good enough. You need to work on that and optimize that and not worry about the 20% until later.
All right, thank you, Toby. Next question is from Adam. Can any of the panelists comment on how GIS plays a role in asset management practices and software? And I believe we were going to start with Hesha on that one.
I think GIS can play an important role in asset management in as much as having that visual reference is always helpful when you're dealing with the elected officials. Being able to map your assets sometimes helps problems and successes to be shown more clearly. Also, being able to integrate, if your organization has a robust GIS system, being able to integrate that information and provide that information to the public or to the engineering community and development community is critical to adding to the services that you can offer in your community.
All right, and Jeff, you wanted to add to the answer?
Yeah, I would just add that, I mean, certainly the GIS is really critical to any asset management program that involves linear assets. From my perspective, you know, the foundation for any asset management program is understanding what you own. And so if you've got linear assets, for me, the GIS is the system of record for really all infrastructure assets that are linear. Whereas your maintenance management system, your Maximo, your Oracle, WAM, your CityWorks, you know, like a CityWorks is a bad example, but because it's so tightly integrated with GIS. But you know, between the maintenance management system and the GIS, I would consider those two kind of the core of any asset management program that includes both linear and nonlinear assets. And the tighter you can integrate the two, obviously the better.
All right, and Chris, did you want to add to that question? Either Chris or Darwin?
Sound right?
Yep.
If you haven't got a lot of resources, a lot of funding, I'd be wary about going and spending a lot of money on software and GIS straight up. Again, I'd draw you back to starting to write your asset management plan, usually on information you've got in a spreadsheet. A lot of the great number of municipalities out there are smaller, medium municipalities. They've got some information in their spreadsheets. Start there. If you can spend a lot of money and a lot of time on GIS and software without fully understanding what you're doing. So if you're a little bit more mature and you've got more funds, definitely. But if things are really scarce and you're starting at the beginning, I'd suggest just working with your spreadsheet, getting an asset management plan up and going. It's horses for courses, but that's just another perspective.
All right, Darwin, did you have something you wanted to add on this one?
Yeah, it's going to echo a lot what Chris said, but for anybody entering into it or with limited resources, there's nothing wrong with a highlighter on a map. There's nothing wrong with pins that show where the accidents were or the water complaints are. And using that to develop your overall picture of what you're trying to chase and where is your issues that you're trying to deal with. Nothing's worse than walking that plank in front of council, talking them into a GIS program that I've seen time and again, and some other staffs to do that, and then those people get pilloried by their colleagues in the Public Works Department saying, well, nobody asked us where the problem was or where the fix was required. So I think getting a good handle on issues and where they are, as simple as some pins in a map or some circles with a highlighter, can go a long ways, and even different colors of highlighters can help you figure out the condition of what's there. So just echoing what Chris is saying, and the theme that we've been saying from the start, a lot of you already have systems in place that are doing a lot of this work. Try and adopt and adapt it into the lens of asset management rather than reinvent entirely the good work you're doing.
Okay, thank you. And kind of as a follow-up to the maps and highlighters, we have a question from a couple people about what type of software are you using to assist with asset management, and then how was the asset management platform or software selected for any of you that want to answer? I think Hesha was going to go first on that one.
Thanks, Rita. For our agency, when we chose our software, we had no idea what we were doing going in. And so the director, I was not the director at the time, but the director at the time had limited knowledge of technology, and one great thing that she did was to bring everyone together from the different departments that would need to be involved so that we could come together and select something that would work for us. And so we actually interviewed several companies. We brought them in. We had them do some extensive demos, not just superficial. And we had a lot of growing pains, a lot of bumps and bruises. The company that we initially selected, we got very far into the process with them, and it wasn't working. So our IT department was able to help us basically pull the plug there and stop wasting our time in that direction, and then we ended up selecting another company. But you need to figure out what exactly do you want to get out of the system, and not just short-term, long-term. So you can do it in phases and ramp up as you go, and we're very pleased with what we're using now. Thanks, Rita.
All right. Toby, I believe you were next on answering this question.
Sure. Yeah, there's, I think we've heard this a little bit from others before, is asset management is way more than software. And so the caution, of course, is if you're going to start an asset management system, don't imagine that that means the first thing you do to start an asset management system is buy a piece of software. In fact, I always encourage people to play with the data for 2 data cycles. If as others suggest, a piece of paper on a wall, but if you look at the data for 2 years, or I mean two cycles of data, you will be able to determine then what you look at in terms of the data, what you can use. There's lots of different avenues, and we have used 6 different asset management, maintenance management systems that are available on the market today in Pierce County. And we are honing it down now to probably closer to 2 or 3. But we are finding that there is different needs for different types of systems. What you need in a building is not necessarily going to work exactly the same in a sewer system nor a road system. So what matters less is about the piece of software, and it's more about the data that you need to be able to optimize your infrastructure and understanding that part of it, because there's lots of different canned solutions that can get you there. What I see, unfortunately, for so many is, especially the smaller jurisdictions, is they'll go out and spend a bunch of money on a piece of software, and so then they're essentially slaves to the software in terms of how they're developing their asset management systems, rather than taking the perspective of what will work for them and then finding a piece of software that will support them in that, rather than the other way around.
Thank you, Toby. Chris, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I think buying software, you need to be an informed buyer, so an informed client. And a good way, I'll go back to starting again, is writing asset management plan. The software I would suggest would be Microsoft Excel and Microsoft Word. That's where, for the great majority of people, like there's definitely different scales and different maturity, but the great number, you can write your asset management plan using a spreadsheet and a Word document, and that will give you a better understanding, like knowing what data to collect, but also what kind of functionality you need in your software. And there's definitely a place for software, but I think it shouldn't be right up front. It should be get a better understanding, know where you're heading, know what you need, and then you can have a more mature, informed discussion with your software providers on the kind of software you might need.
Thank you, Chris. Jeff, you wanted to add something to this answer?
Yeah, I mean, I generally, I guess, agree with everything that's been said so far. You know, a lot of people hurry in buying software, and then what we see most of the time is that folks just aren't utilizing it to its full capabilities, or not utilizing it really at all, and so it becomes a wasted investment. I guess I actually was a software developer for a while, and so a lot of the work I do now is helping folks select software systems, and so it's a real challenge to maintain an understanding of all the different maintenance management systems, software products that are out there, you know, all the other kind of degradation modeling software that's out there, renewal planning software. It's kind of daunting to maintain an understanding of it, and so it comes back to, you know, what we've, I think, been saying as far as asset management in general. You kind of need to start with the end in mind. on an asset management program, the same way you need to start with the end in mind in terms of software selection. And so I'd recommend, really kind of, I guess, identifying what your requirements are, what your asset types are, and selecting software based on, your particular requirements, and then evaluating the different software products that are out there against those requirements. It's a challenge, and more often than not, people, despite their best intentions and going through a rigorous selection process, still struggle to really benefit fully from the software that they select.
Thank you, Jeff. Darwin, did you have something you wanted to add on this one?
Yeah, I sure do. I've worked on projects where we're trying to optimize huge power plants or cogeneration systems, and using the leading or bleeding edge from big blue software development to all the rest of it. But it's still the humans that are in the room making the decision. And I just want to echo entirely what has been said by Jeff and Chris, that the fundamentals are first. If you're going on a journey somewhere, you usually pick where you're going before you jump in the car and start racing around. So yeah, enjoy the journey and pick the destination, and you'll learn as you go. And if you invest too much in that big wrong machine, it's going to be tough to explain and tough to walk back once. So humans are always there. The software won't do it for you. Thanks.
Thanks, Darwin. And Toby, I believe you had a closing thought on that question.
Well, yeah, there's one other thought that I just wanted to add in there, and that is typically it's the public works folks who are exploring asset management first. But I just want to remind you that there are other people in your organization, in your jurisdiction, who are involved and need asset information. So while they may not be designing your renewal projects or managing your maintenance and operations, they are involved, and they need to be tied in to anything so that you don't end up with multiple asset management or asset information systems. And those are your financial folks, the people that are in charge of the finances of your jurisdiction. The long-range planners are typically involved, and as well as your policymakers obviously need to be involved. And so rather than having each one of those different parts of a jurisdiction go out there and collect the information they need on the assets, it's more effective if you, as was suggested, figure out what you need, bring everybody in the room who needs that information before you ever buy any software.
Thank you, Toby. That was great answers by everyone on the panel. The next question is from Gina. Do you consider utility easements an asset? If so, how do you assign a value? Darwin, did you want to answer that one? Is that your hand up from the last question?
Definitely they are an asset, and they're very real. So to get it very succinct, generally a lot of the easements will be on private land, and that private land has a market value already. And easements generally run here in Canada between 65 and 100% of the value of the surrounding or the parent parcel that's on it. So yes, they can be identified, and they can have a value. Your taxation department probably assesses it to apply a tax rate to it. So try to use whatever they're using as well.
Thank you, Darwin. Just wanted to mention that today's program was scheduled to end at this time. We do have a few more questions. If you want to stay on the line, you're more than welcome to participate. One of the questions we received was what asset management training would be helpful when starting an asset management program? Chris, do you want to start by answering that one?
Yes, well, we used to do or we still do, face-to-face training, but we've taken that over onto an online program. So we now offer the online professional certificate in asset management planning. We've trained about 1,200 people. With the Canadian government, there's a lot of activity in Canada, and in Canada, we've just put 200 people from municipalities through on how to write their asset management plan using their own data while they earn a qualification. And the FCM, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, have done explored a lot of people have done that and got testimonials, and they're actually now providing us with virtually there'll be about $3 million worth of training delivered over the next 18 months to Canadian municipalities in asset management. So we'll be training about 1,200 people over the next 18 months, including converting it into French and running a course for 200 in Quebec or French speaking as well. So the Canadian government's definitely putting a lot of, recognising the value in this asset management online training. The plus is you can do it remotely. You can do it in more of your own time. So it's 8 modules over 10 weeks. And then we give you another 3 or 4 weeks to write your asset management plan. We give you access to all our tools and templates so you can actually write your plan. And the big feedback we get is just how interactive the course is. When you've got 200 people in your cohort, we break them into 3 cohorts for discussion, but then bring them all together in the live sessions, which are also recorded. We get some really good feedback on the interaction amongst the 200 participants. So if you wanted to find out more, a good place to start is just to undertake the course. In Canada, it's heavily subsidized, but it's in the US, it's about $2,000 for the course. And you can find out more information at ipwea.org/certificate.
Okay, and I believe Toby wanted to add to that question.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that we're just going to start our new APWA Asset Management Committee in August, and so next month at PWX. And one of the first things that we've been talking about doing is developing a strategic asset development plan, if you will, for the committee. So what are we going to be working on for the next 3 years or so, 3 or 4 years as a committee to help the membership? And of course, one of the things besides, advocacy and some, benchmarking and some other aspects of asset management, one of the things we're going to be doing is talking about what are the training resources out there. And we aren't going to, the one thing we're not looking at doing is reinventing the wheel here, but we do know that a lot of these small jurisdictions are trying to do this without much resources, and so we're trying to provide tools and templates that would be available for you as an APWA member for free or for free use. And so we're looking at that as a committee, and I just want to assure everybody watching on APWA that this is going to be a high priority for the committee, is to look at how do we provide resources for you to be able to make your asset management journey easier.
Thanks, Toby. Darwin, you were next on this one?
Hey, you bet. So, folks, with regard to training and entering into asset management, we agonized over this a lot in Canada. We agonized it within our own company. We agonized with it in CPWA. And I can say unequivocally the NAMS product that we borrowed from the Australian New Zealand group, the International Infrastructure Management Manual, is the principles that at least allow you a fighting chance to get in the game and get some progress. in those communities, when we did our infrastructure state of practice and state of infrastructure report card back in 2011, we quickly found that the larger cities that were already practicing asset management, we weren't going to change how they're doing that. There might be some nuances. We might argue over 2 decimal places of depreciation rate that we apply to particular areas. But for that audience that the Government of Canada is investing tens of millions in to get them into the asset management game, we had to get a common platform that everybody could adopt and adapt and get into it quickly. So with that, you know, there's systems that are out there that lots of vendors have that have different advantages. In Canada, we went through that with FCM, we went through that with our Public Works Association. Each province and jurisdiction went on a long sojourn to figure it out, and Chris was just speaking about how much is being invested now to get that common picture from the East Coast to the North Coast to the West Coast, and move forward from there. So the training is very important, but having the most generalized training is probably the most important when you're starting out.
Thank you, Darwin. And to circle back on this question, Chris had something to add.
Yes, from our experience, because we've got a lot of publications and we've done and tools and templates, that we really need, it's really hard to open the book or open the spreadsheet and get started. So that's why we've found that you need the training and the working with your peers to be guided through on how to write an asset management plan. So you could get the free templates and other free publications and other resources, but you need to actually be able to regularly, once a week, get in there, open the book, be taken along the journey. So we've found that you need that hands-on guidance and support and experience to, and that's why the feedback, the testimonials we get on people who have done the online course, you wouldn't think an 8-week, 10-week online course, I wouldn't have thought 5 years ago when we started, that it would be something that you really want to continue with. But the feedback we get is it just enthuses people because they're interacting with our presenters online, they're interacting with the participants, and they really get into it. So I think it helps when you're not lonely trying to have a go at it, but when you're part of a bigger group where you can really, it really ends up being enjoyable. The people are enthused about it.
Thank you, Chris. I think that is probably going to be the last question that we had time for today. I wanted to, I guess, have time if the panelists wanted to add anything just to close out the program. Toby, do you have anything you'd like to end with, some closing remarks?
Sure, thanks, Rita. Yeah, no, I think everybody that's tuned in, it's exciting that we had this large of a group interested in this question and answer forum. And again, there's more to come because you now have a group of people from across the United States who are going to be focused on this as a standing committee, and we're going to be bringing you more discussions, more articles, more sessions at the PWX and also at your state forums, your conferences that you have in your state chapters and your state meetings. So we're going to be reaching out a lot more in this important area of public works to support you again in your asset management journey, whether you're just starting, whether you've been doing it for 10 years, there's going to be a bigger focus within APWA on this, and I look forward to being able to talk with more of you in the future.
All right, thanks, Toby. Hesha had to go off the call, so next we'll go with Darwin.
It's a pleasure to be able to impart a few pearls of wisdom and hopefully share some experience. Asset management is easier than you think. Focus on the future, and that's the risks you're trying to avoid and the level of service to deliver. And the history or the past is kind of the condition in the inventory. You already know that. So focus forward and enjoy the journey.
Thank you, Darwin. Jeff, would you like to include some closing remarks?
I think Darwin said it pretty well. The bottom line is, this is something you're already doing. Develop that plan for how you're going to move things incrementally forward and follow through with it. It is a daunting thing if you look at some of the case studies and examples that are out there, but just consider where you are today and what those little pieces are going to be to help move you forward, and maybe what is that pilot project you can kind of tackle using asset management concepts to help make the case for implementing asset management across your organization. Good luck.
Thank you, Jeff. And then finally, Chris, any final thoughts?
No, I think it's definitely a journey. So it's good to get started, and it's a new career in Australia. A lot of the positions vacant jobs in Australia for local government are actually asset managers. So it's a bit of quite a career opportunity as well. And so I'd encourage people, if they've got a bit of an interest, to start training up and getting into it and see where it takes them on the journey.
Thank you so much, Chris, and enjoy your Friday. I wanted to thank Chris, Jeff, Darwin, Hesha, and Toby for sharing their knowledge and experience with us today. This is Rita Cassida, and it's been a pleasure moderating this program for you. We wanted to show you the agency infrastructure report that was built by the Asset Management Task Force to aid organizations with developing an overview to share with their governing body and their residents. So you can find that on the APWA website under the Resource Center under Resources. So please take a look at that. That's one of the new tools that Toby was talking about from the Asset Management Task Force, soon to be the Asset Management Committee. So please remember to register for the next program in this series that's titled Talking Top Tech, Geographic Information Systems, GIS, and Mapping. It is scheduled for Thursday, September 13th at 11 Eastern, 10 Central, 9 Mountain, and 8 Pacific. Also, don't forget to fill out the evaluation form. The link to the survey is listed on your program instructions. A recording of today's program will be available in the members library and also on YouTube within 1 week. APWA members can log into the library to access past Click, Listen, and Learn, Talking Top Tech, and conference content free of charge. After today's program, please join us on the LinkedIn community to continue the conversation. The link was included with your program instructions and is on the screen now. We had more questions that were submitted by participants than we were able to answer, so please feel free to add questions on that LinkedIn platform, and we can work with the panelists to get those answers. I want to thank you for your attendance and participation, and have a great evening or morning, depending on which part of the country or world you are on. Thank you.
Bye-bye.